You're listening to TBR Radio Presents the DIXIE Heritage Hour with your host, the Director of DIXIE Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
The Success Express has rolled into the TBR Radio Presents the DIXIE Heritage Hour station. Our guest this week is Sid Secular. Sid Secular is the president and CEO of the Success Express. He is also, for the last several years, been the executive editor of the Citizens Informer magazine, a position from which he has recently retired, which is giving him a little bit more free time so that he can come and talk to us about a number of issues here on today's broadcast. Of course, as a magazine editor, there's all kinds of information that has crossed his desk through the years that he's been privy to. Some of it he's published, some of it he's not published. But he is not ashamed to talk about it on today's broadcast. So stay tuned, because I know that you're going to get an earful and you are going to get an education as I chat here in a moment with Sid Secular. Sid was our guest on TBR Radio Presents the DIXIE Heritage Hour last year. Without checking the calendar, I am going to say that was probably a show that aired back in February of 2018, if my memory serves. And it was actually one of our higher rated shows. And I've had a lot of people for the last year or so saying, hey, when are you going to have Sid Secular back on the show? And so we are going to do that today. Of course, it's not without ulterior motive, because Sid has invited me to come and speak at an event that he is coordinating up near the nation's capital, up in Maryland, on June 9th. And so this kind of gives us an opportunity to promote that event, as well as to talk some shop and some politics with Sid for the next hour. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and go into my phone call with Sid Secular. Invited me to come, and you're organizing a meeting up near the nation's capital for me to speak in June. But before that, you've invited Rick Tyler up, and you're organizing a meeting for him to speak as well. And so why don't you start by telling me about the Rick Tyler meeting, and maybe we could promote a little bit of a crowd for that as well.
I met Rick Tyler last year. He was one of the MCs at the Nationalist Solutions Conference in June in Tennessee. He impressed me. I realized recently that I impressed him somehow. I'm not quite sure how. He's coming here to give a talk. And the location I can't give out unless people sign up with me, and they can do that by email. I want to make sure I don't have anybody that might be a surprise and wouldn't be welcomed. And I have a core of people that come to just about all my meetings. So we have a good group. And he's going to talk about his campaign to be the presidential candidate for the American Freedom Party in 2020. And this would be at 2 p.m. on May 5th, a Sunday. And it would be in Central Maryland. I said Western Maryland, but Central is more accurate.
So this would be the Sunday before I'm speaking.
Well, you're going to be June the 9th. It's actually a month ahead of yours, a month and a few days ahead of yours. Yours is the beginning of June, and his is the beginning of May 5th. We got a little spread between the two.
Okay.
So
you had mentioned that Rick is entertaining a 2020 presidential run as the candidate of the American Freedom Party. The last time I spoke to Rick, which was a few months ago, now maybe 2 months ago, he had told me that the Freedom Party was emphasizing supporting Trump, and that probably after Trump had left office would be the time when they would seek to pursue a candidate of their own. Do you know of something that has changed that thought process?
It's just some material. He sent me an email indicating that he would be the candidate. So I didn't know that. I know the American Freedom Party supported President Trump the last time around, but maybe they changed their mind, or maybe they're thinking that President Trump won't run again or won't be able to run again. I don't know what the thinking is. We'll find that out at the meeting. I'm a little bit confused about that myself. But Rick is the CEO of the American Freedom Party, so he has a lot of sway on who the presidential candidate will be of that party. They did support President Trump the last time around by doing a lot of telephone calling for him, that I know. They feel that President Trump is not the solution to our problems. He's kind of a stepping stone toward a solution, and that he goes for some of our policies and not others. in certain areas he's taken action, and it's kind of partial, but not really complete. Like in the immigration area, there's a lot of things left undone so far, besides working toward erecting a border wall, on the southern border. It's in the works, but I don't know if there's enough money there to do much of wall. There's 2,000 miles of wall, and we got perhaps 55 to 60 miles of actual wall right now. Some of that is apparently inadequate because we see pictures of illegal migrants climbing these walls. So I don't know. So some of it might be high enough or greasy enough or whatever that they can't do it. In other places, they seem to be able to do it. And then we have a problem with tunnels that's not publicized at all. Since the early 1990s, we've had over 200 miles, 200 instances of tunneling under the existing walls. And some of these tunnels are quite long and extensive. They can go a half a mile or a mile, and they're semi-permanent. They actually set up infrastructure like water and electricity within these tunnels. So, they've been ongoing for quite a while. Of course, as soon as they're found, they're destroyed, but they keep on making new ones. And then we have other minor, and I don't know if they're minor or not, but there's other ways to get over the wall, such as little air vehicles that employ small motors, even as small as lawnmower motors, to create a vehicle to surmount, fly over the walls, and they can go some distance beyond the walls.
So you're saying that aliens are breaching the border in hovercraft?
They're breaching it in hovercraft, and I've actually read it. They've been catapulted over. Shot over like shot from guns, like the old lad used to say. And they're devising various ways to get over and under the walls that exist right now. And much of the border is unprotected right now. There's miles and miles of area that have no barriers at all, and they can just cross Rio Grande, which is fordable. You can actually walk across the Rio Grande. It would get up to your chest maybe, but you can still walk across it. It's not that deep. It's like fording a little stream someplace pretty much. There's all kinds of problems associated with that border.
Well, you've heard the joke, Sid. The reason why Mexico does not have a winning Olympic team. Anyone who can run, jump, or swim is already in America.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Maybe 25% of the population of Mexico is already here, and then we got the people from south of Mexico going through Mexico to come to our border, and we got a lot of them. And they're from the most notorious nations in Central America where they have the most violence, like Honduras and Guatemala, El Salvador. They have the most gangs and the most highest rates of murder in the Western Hemisphere. We got that kind of culture being imported into our country, which is not very good. People that don't want to become Americans, and we got the danger of terrorists mixing in with the migrants. We got the drug pushers and the drug conveyors, and we got child molesters coming in. President Trump has tried to put a lid on that, but if you can't control the border, how can you control taking advantage of children as sex slaves and otherwise? But there's a lot of that occurring, and there's thousands of cases of that every single year. There's a lot of sex slavery in the world that Americans are not aware of. A lot of it is perpetrated by people crossing the border. Because without saying we had a lot of drugs crossing the border, we need to get control of it in order to, reduce our crime rate substantially.
Well, I know you know who Tom Kaczynski is. He told me recently that within the next 10 years, given the demographic changes and the forced migration and the refugee resettlements into Canada, he said give it less than 10 years and our problem will not be the southern border, it will be the northern border.
I've heard that too. The conditions in Canada are more favorable to the migrants than even here, so that there's a problem with people coming into the United States and then crossing our northern border into Canada, like we're a transshipment point or just an intermediate point. So, actually, we may have people coming to the United States just to come through it to Canada. That's an additional problem we have. We don't have anything going on as a practical matter to protect us at the northern border. It's all open because it hasn't been a problem up to now, and that's a really long border, which is longer than the southern border.
Well, the southern border only covers half of the country. You go from Texas to California, but the northern border encompasses, the entirety of the country. and
Yeah,
is, I'm sure, more than twice as long as the southern border.
yes, it is. Yes, for sure it is. Mexico only has a smaller border with us than Canada does by far. Or by less, if you want to call it that. There's a lot more territory there, and there's a lot of ways to get in besides even the border. You can circumvent it by going by water. Up the oceans, Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, and down the St. Lawrence Seaway. There's all kinds of ways of doing it.
I do not know of any towns on the southern border that are like this, but I know on the northern border there are more than a few towns where half of the town is in Canada and half of the town is in the United States.
Yeah, there are places like that. Not very highly populated area, and it's very easy for people to come through. And there's a lot of Indian reservations not far from the border where these Indians are very uncooperative with us, and the migrants kind of take advantage of that, and they actually intermarry with the Indians, and so establish a base of operations that way. I once wrote an article on that there's an Indian reservation in northern New York State where the migrants come through there into Canada very easily. The Indians are very friendly with them, with the migrants, and really don't help us out at all. We have a similar situation, I believe, in Arizona. There's an Indian reservation down there the migrants use as a base to penetrate the rest of the United States. Indians themselves are notorious drug users, so they're very happy to use the drugs that the migrants are bringing along with them. It doesn't help the situation. And then we have so-called legal immigration. We have just as many legal immigrants as illegal immigrants, and a lot of these legal people are doing it the right way, but for the wrong reasons. They're also involved in illegal activities, or they're not very strong Americans, or wouldn't be anyway in the first place. They're just here to make some money, or to hook up with their relatives that are already here. We're leading into another problem, which is chain migration. Once you establish the presence of a family member here, you can bring in all kinds of people indirectly related to you, uncles, aunts, and so forth, and they could bring in another swarm of people. So it's almost unlimited, the number of people that can come in here from elsewhere. It's really a gigantic problem. I believe it's the 14th Amendment that's misinterpreted in a way that justifies bringing in anybody and everybody that you can. That I think a judicial decision has to be made. It should go to the Supreme Court. Having chain migration is not what the 14th Amendment was intended to do. It related to the situation with the blacks back way over 100 years ago. It had nothing to do with any kind of migration. It's being abused by the leftists right now. We got President Trump has actually authorized an increase in the number of legal immigrants. And then these foreign workers are coming here on temporary visas or green cards and such like that. He's actually authorized an increase in that type of thing, whereas we don't really have a labor shortage right now. We have Americans that are out of work because the illegals and others are taking their positions in the workforce. These Indians and Chinese are being favored because they can, come in for much less smaller labor rates than the others.
Well, I read that for all the new jobs that are being created, if you look at the immigration numbers, that we're taking in more immigrants than we are creating jobs.
We definitely are, and once they're in here on a temporary basis, that they're not ejected or rejected, they stay here pretty much. And we have people in here on travel visas, and they're supposed to go back, and they never do. So there's all kinds of loopholes and ways of foreigners to get here and stay here. The number that could come here is very large. If a Democrat comes into the White House again in 2020, we really have a problem. Right now, the Border Patrol is really being overwhelmed. We have more people coming in the last few months than we've ever had before, and we don't have the means to handle it. We have technology to detect these people, but apparently that's not being used either. Then we actually need the manpower. Even if we had the technology, we need the manpower to arrest these people. A good number get in without even being detected right now, so we don't have the people to do that with. And we have the equivalent of the Minutemen right now. We have a new group here that's trying to help the Border Patrol, and they're being arrested. So I was wondering all these years what happened to the Minutemen. I guess they gave up, and now it's getting so bad we have a revival of a Minuteman type outfit there. It's been in the news the last few days, and the leader was arrested, so I guess that puts an end to that activity. We have problems, no doubt about that. Then we have the problem with assimilation. population of the people already here. They want to stick to their own ethnic groups, and they don't want to learn English. Actually, with the Hispanic population, after being here for a very long time, they still don't learn English. The foreign language is used instead of English, so they don't really assimilate very well. The Hispanics are kind of unique in a certain sense. All the ethnic groups we've had as immigrants in the past, at some point, kind of integrated or assimilated with the native population, but they don't seem to do that at all. I mean, actually, after 2 generations of being here, they haven't taken any measures to improve their assimilation. They're actually, educationally speaking, they're actually worse off than their grandparents or parents were. They're not taking advantage of the educational opportunities we have. It's kind of a Trojan horse. Then we have the Africans. They're projected to come here in increasing numbers, and their IQ is lower than like 65 or 70, which is just going to be the next source of a large migration here. All these trends are not very favorable to us right now.
Well, what about what President Trump said in these migrations? He said we're getting the worst of these populations and of these other countries and not their best.
We have our MS-13 gangs over here, of course, They're kind of restricted to their own areas right now, but who knows, they might start penetrating everywhere else. There's a cluster of MS-13s not far from where I live, perhaps 2 miles away. That area is kind of taken over by them entirely. It's kind of almost a no-go zone, you might say.
If you love listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, then I know that you'll love reading the Barnes Review. The Barnes Review is one of my favorite magazines. I began reading the Barnes Review long before they became a sponsor here on the program. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There's just not a more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So if you'll visit www.barnesreview.org, that's www.barnesreview.org, you can find out how you too can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review by mail, or you can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review electronically in PDF editions. Or you can subscribe to receive both. That's what I do. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You'd also said you wanted to talk about the Electoral College. I honestly do not see how. Well, first of all, it's a total end run around the Constitution.
Yes, it is, no doubt about that. Several states have already indicated they won't, but they're just going to go along with whoever was elected by majority vote. 7 or 8 states already said they're going to do that. They're chipping away at the Electoral College that way. They could go by the Electoral College, but it's not going to mean anything because it's just going to go along with the popular vote.
Well, the problem with the states so far that have announced that they're going to cast their Electoral College votes in whatever direction the popular vote went is that if they do that, a candidate is only, I want to say, like 60 electoral votes shy of winning an election.
That's true.
So it would make it impossible for somebody to legitimately and honestly win the Electoral College.
Yeah, that's right. All the smaller states basically don't have any say-so in a case like that. Red area is kind of left out altogether. There's something like, there's 3 counties in New York State, and there's Chicago, and there's the state of California. Between these areas, which constitute a minute portion of the geography of the United States, they control what happens to the rest of the country. They're perhaps less than 5% of the area. They're controlling the other 95% of the American landscape.
For the life of me, I don't know that there is a legal remedy to the matter because there's nothing in the Constitution that stipulates how an elector has to vote. And there's also nothing in the Constitution that stipulates that a state cannot instruct its electors how to vote. So I don't know that there's a remedy, and if this were to, say, go to court, I don't know that there is any legal footing that even the most conservative or constructionalist of judges could stand on.
Really, there isn't. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. The Democrats in Congress are pushing for an actual elimination of the Electoral College altogether. The whole thing might go by the boards.
Well, the Democrats want to set it up. I don't know if you heard the last voting reform legislation that went to the House of Representatives. They want to set it up to where they have polling places on foreign soil so that people can vote in Germany and in Great Britain and France and Iran and, anywhere where they could get a polling booth set up.
That's.
And their question, of course, their reasoning for that is, well, there might be Americans traveling or living abroad who could therefore vote in that election. But, of course, we know that there won't be any legitimate effort to prevent others from voting in that election as well.
That's true.
What my personal opinion is that you have an election day and you have a polling place and you have to be there between, say, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And if you cannot make it to that place on that day, you do not get to vote. I don't care if it's because you're in the military serving overseas. I don't care if it's because you're in prison. I don't care if it's because you have to work. I don't care if it's because you're in a hospital. I don't care if it's because you're a senior citizen who can't get out. You either get to the polling place at the appointed time or you do not vote. No absentee ballots, no mail-in ballots, no early voting, no late voting. It's just, this is the time, this is the place, show up or you don't vote.
Yeah, we can't compromise with that kind of thing. The latest ploy is to make Election Day an official holiday, which...
I would be okay with that because it would give more people the opportunity to go to the appointed place at the appointed time.
Of course, just open it up all the more.
I mean, I would be okay with that because it would definitely help more people to be able to get there because it's all of the early voting and the late voting and the absentee ballots. That's where all of the fraud is happening.
Yes, the late voting particularly, it allows some hanky-panky at the polls, particularly in these black ghetto areas. They're the last ones to report the results just because they commit some kind of forgery or whatever to add additional black votes to the account. They have even dead people, and they have people that have moved out of the area. They enter those names, and they do all kinds of crazy things, election fraud type things. It's just a massive problem. And then we have the problem with electronic voting machines, which themselves are easy to manipulate. And a lot of these problems are in states where they're borderline between Republicans and Democrats. They can go either way, like these industrial states like Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota. They can go either way, and a little bit of hanky-panky, Pennsylvania's another one. Just a little bit of illegal voting will turn the election around. And then we have the problem with they want prisoners or inmates to be allowed to vote. That's neither here nor there, but we know that the inmates are probably the least educated and patriotic of the populace that we have. It's not a very good thing to do. And then we have another problem with people that are citizens of the United States and another country. Like you said, if we have voting from another place, maybe these dual citizens will be given the right to vote in this other country if they happen to be through there just because they're dual citizens. I guess that's part of the strategy of being a dual citizen. That's another thing that should be plugged up. You can only be loyal to one place, really, when you come right down to it. And if there's a conflict between one country and the other, what happens in that case? You can't be loyal to both. I was once an election judge here, Republican election judge here in my area here, and I encountered firsthand the problems with illegal voters. They went up to me and asked me, who do I vote for? They couldn't even read the ballots in Spanish or English. They were allowed to vote in Spanish, but they couldn't even do that. They assumed I was on their side. I mean, that was the most insane thing I've ever seen. So I just resigned at that point.
Well, spotting a Republican polling judge, I mean, you'll find Yogi Bear at a national park before you see a Republican voting judge somewhere.
Well, here in Maryland, anyway, you have to have an equal number of Republican and Democrat voting judges.
Okay, yeah, because most places it's all the Democrats who sign up to be the poll workers.
There's less opportunity for hanky-panky here maybe than other places, but it's still that illegals get to vote, The records are not exactly correct. The addresses in their logbooks are not up to date, and some people manage to get registered in more than one jurisdiction they can vote 2 and 3 times. They can only go by what's already in the books. I mean, they can't start an investigation on Election Day, so, things happen that way. Vote early and often is kind of the expression that's used for this kind of thing.
what was I listening to? I can't remember. It might have been the Sean Hannity show. I can't remember whose radio show I was listening to maybe a week or so ago now. And they were interviewing the director of Project Veritas. And he had got people on the record to admitting basically to committing a felony. And the felony that he got them to confess to on camera, and they knew they were being recorded, so it was a secret recording or anything, was that basically people were voting in multiple primaries and in multiple elections. Like, for example, in the last midterm election, what they were doing, early voting in Florida, when they were down there in their winter home or what have you. Then they would go home, we'd go back up north, go to Connecticut, go to Rhode Island, go to wherever, Massachusetts, and they would be home, and then they would vote during the regular election there, or they would cast an absentee ballot by mail to their home polling place up north while they were also voting at an actual polling place in Florida, or vice versa. They owned a property in Florida. They were registered to vote in both places, but they hadn't come down yet for their snowbird season, so they would vote up north and cast absentee in Florida. But essentially they were voting in two different states, casting at least 2 different ballots.
I think this problem is more prevalent in California than anywhere else. I think Los Angeles County has more instances of this kind of voting more than once than any other place, and they have dead people on the rolls who are only being partially, the polls are being partially corrected for this kind of problem, and there's still dead people on the voting records. Los Angeles County, I think, has a population equal to like 10 other states, and there's probably enough illegal voting going on to be the equivalent of a small state somewhere, or an unpopulated state like Wyoming or somewhere like that. It's really very, very much worse of a problem than people realize going to register in multiple places. They fool around with the ballots once the voting is completed by either changing ballots or throwing out ballots, or just stuffing ballots with people coming in at the last minute like they do in these black areas. They bus them in, and they might come in, half an hour before the polls close, and they just, go crazy voting, and they stay after hours. The polls are extended for 2 or 3 hours after they're supposed to close, let's say at 7 p.m. They let them vote until 9 or 10 p.m. They're doing all kinds of exceptions to things they shouldn't be doing. So there's just multiple problems all across the board with that.
Well, I know here in Florida during the midterm, they held up the election results for over a week as they were doing everything they could to stuff that ballot box. And I remember one day, it was 2 or 3 days after the polls had closed, a U-Haul truck just shows up at an elementary school or a middle school or some kind of a public school, and the principal calls the Board of Elections and says, you're not going to believe this, but there's a whole U-Haul truck full of ballots in our parking lot right now. What do I do with them? And so they took them and they counted them.
Just anything goes nowadays.
Yeah. There was somebody else who called the police department, and they said that there were boxes of ballots in the dumpster. They're like, what do we do with them? And so the police came and picked them up and took them to the supervisor of elections, who counted them.
It's really hard to believe. I mean, this country is lawless nowadays.
I think the reason they got away with it is because all of those extra votes didn't affect the governor's race or the Senate race. It only affected House races. And maybe they just figured nobody cares about the House of Representatives. It also begs the question, so somebody voted Republican for governor, they voted Republican for Senate, but they voted for some liberal, whacked-out Democrat for their House district.
Such is the stuff of Americana nowadays. And then it's motor-voter type of thing where people, can sign up to vote when they get their licenses or visit the Motor Vehicle Bureau, which is another avenue for fraud.
Well, I looked at mine the other day, and I realized it was scheduled to expire here in a few months. And I needed to change my address on it anyways, because the address that I had on it is an office that I've not worked in for a couple of years now. And so I needed to have another address put on it. And so being the proactive guy I am, I called, and I'm like, okay, so what do I do to change the address? And they told me to go to a website, and I go to the website. I had to fill in about 6 blanks and pay $28. And 4 days later, a brand new license comes in the mail. They just take the old picture, put it on the new one, don't have to wait in line, don't have to do anything. It's super convenient. But at the same time, it's real scary because presumably anybody else could have got online, filled out the same 6 or 7 blanks, paid $28, and had my driver's license and my voter registration and my everything else.
Right.
Florida is also a state where, you know, when you get a driver's license or an ID card, you're automatically registered to vote unless you tell them you do not want to be. I could see how it streamlines the process of registering people, and I really don't have a problem with it as long as only people who would be eligible to vote are able to be registered in that process. The problem is a lot of people, as you know, get a driver's license who are not eligible to vote.
There's a problem in a lot of liberal jurisdictions where illegals are being given the driver's licenses just for convenience sake, so they can participate in modern society by going here and there by vehicle. As long as they're here, you can't bottle them up and prohibit them from moving around, so they're giving them licenses, and it just goes through without any opposition.
Well, I had a friend of mine, and he probably could not have pulled it off, even though he speaks fluent Spanish, just because he's too white to do it. And, he speaks his Spanish with a southern drawl, but he was having a difficult time getting his driver's license and some other things. And I told him, I said, just go out to California. Tell him your name is Pedro Rodriguez, and you're in the country illegally, and you don't want to get caught. And I said, they probably won't even charge you the $20 or whatever. They'll probably just take your picture and give you one.
These people are given every possible privilege under the sun, and to the detriment of our own people. We have the problem of in-state tuition. These illegals and people who are not citizens are getting college entry by the rates that the people within in the states are getting, and people from out of states going to college are paying higher rates than the illegals are paying to attend college.
Well, this is the crazy thing. Is I was preaching in Alabama recently, and there was a young man in the service, and he had driven in, having been a student at the University of Georgia. And so I asked him, I said, well, you're from here. I said, why didn't you go to a university in Alabama? Why did you pick the University of Georgia? Mm-hmm. And he told me, he said, because it was cheaper, even paying out-of-state tuition, it was cheaper for him to go to Georgia than it was for him to pay the in-state tuition rate in Alabama.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference between states.
Extra, read all about it.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are because you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. You like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States, the things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. AFP is the preeminent alternative, independent news source for honest, hard-working, truth-loving Americans. AFP is the antithesis of the controlled, lamestream media. AFP is employee-owned and has been so since its founding. Because of that, AFP never has and never will allow advertisers or special interests or big money to dictate what appears in the pages of the American Free Press newspaper. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP covers the stories and tells the truth that the lamestream media is frankly scared to touch. And AFP offers real, on-the-scene reporting and commentary, the likes of which you will never see in the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, or just about any other lamestream news source that you can think of. That's right, there's only one national populist news weekly staffed by an unsurpassed team of veteran investigative journalists who will dare to rip the veil off of many of the major news stories that are being censored and suppressed by the big money-controlled media monopoly. And that's the American Free Press. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
I know the public education system was something you had said that you had wanted to talk about.
Yeah, the public education system is basically a disaster. And I wrote a piece in the upcoming June 2019 Citizen Informer. I have a column in there, a letter from the editor about the public education system. I call it Tragedy of the Public Education System. It's basically an indoctrination system where they're not learning their A's and B's and P's and Q's, and the American students are falling way behind other countries in basic things like math and science. We're down to like number 24, 25 in the world in that regard right now, and we're just falling rapidly. Actually, many years ago, when the public education system was a much smaller component of the overall system, maybe a small fraction of people getting educated or going to public schools, we had a much higher accomplishment rate among our students. The students in let's say, 1880 or 1890 who just graduated high school knew more than the college graduates now, or the people who are graduating high school now are way behind anybody who even went to elementary school in the 19th century. It's just a big joke, and then they're not taught basic Western values, not learning American history. They don't know the first thing about the country or who George Washington was, since we don't have a regular holiday for him anymore. They're just taught a lot of propaganda and indoctrination. So,
well, I was reading the list of people who were eliminated from Texas public school textbooks. The list shocked me because of the 60-some people that they were going to eliminate all mention of in their public school textbooks. 4 of them had been presidents of the United States. You think that alone would cause them to be referenced in history for however long the country is to exist?
Right. President McKinley they took a statue of him in California and took it away from the town center. There's a town something like 200 miles north of San Francisco that's at the vanguard of all the liberal movements that occur in California. And McKinley was accused of doing things to harm the American Indians at that time, and he actually was a friend of the American Indians. He did things for them, to help them out, and they don't even realize that.
Well, he actually signed, I can't remember what it was called, something like the Indian and Native Protection Act or something along those lines.
Yes, yeah, he did, right.
He was also the first president to have a black person on his cabinet.
Yeah, that's true. But they just had a blanket thing against any kind of white there in California. That's what it comes down to. President McKinley, I believe, came from Chicago, and there's still a monument to him. There's a McKinley Park in Chicago, and it won't be long before that goes by the boards, probably. I'm surprised it hasn't by now. Chicago is not one of our better cities right now.
Well, if you thought Rahm Emanuel was a piece of work, you ought to see their new mayor.
The mayor of Baltimore, Ms. P-U-G-H, she just was involved in a scandal and left office and took a leave of absence, and they don't even know where she is right now. It's some kind of medical fraud. There's Medicare and Medicaid are having frauds perpetrated perpetrated by blacks and immigrants at a rate never seen before. Just one day after another, there's all kinds of things like that. There's a lady who has a website, Ann Corcoran. It just brings up all these different perpetrations by crooks, illegals, and all kinds of people that really don't belong here. See, RefugeeWatch.com used to be her site.
Well, you talk about a public education problem and an immigration problem. The problem with bringing in all of these refugees and all of these immigrants is our education system can't handle that influx of children.
Yeah, they're just flooding the system, and the educational budget is a big chunk of our overall budgets, People are forced to pay for public education when their children go to private schools, which is, completely unfair.
Are you trying to tell me that you're too cheap to pay for those poor refugee kids up in Minnesota to get a good public education?
There's robberies and all kinds of schemes being conducted in Minnesota right now where there's a big population of Somalians. They seem to be the worst of the lot. They're conducting more robberies and fraud than anybody else anywhere, it seems, right now. A community about 70 miles from Minneapolis that is just completely taken over by the Somalians. Fraudscrookscriminals.com, that's the site. You sign up with that and you get everything you ever need to know about what's going on in the way of what immigrants and other people are doing illegally.
I know just the other day you were sharing a story with me, something crazy, like some Middle Eastern guy with a sword or something like that.
Oh, there was something happened the other day, which is 15 Target stores in one particular area, walking around with a machete, and a security guard wasn't even called to, get the person out of the store or arrest them or anything like that. Here it is. Charges man used stolen machete in a string of Target robberies in St. Paul. A Minneapolis man is accused of robbing several Twin Cities stores with a machete. He did this to 15 stores before they finally caught up to him. Nobody challenged him walking around with something like that. That's the state of the situation we have right now.
So did he pick the machete because it's shaped like a scimitar?
He used that to cut plastic packaging to steal things, but he's walking around with it like he could have used it to do harm to anybody around him. If somebody stopped him from doing what he was doing, he could have used it to inflict harm on them. He said, Ali was his name. Ali said multiple times that he knew better than to do what he did, the complaint state, but blamed the robberies on his meth addiction and his need to support his habit. So that's another problem all related to this drug habit is just creating all kinds of crime. That goes back to the immigration situation with all the drugs coming back into the country again. Our white populations in our suburban areas and rural areas are succumbing to the opioid problem. It's more than half of that problem is affecting our white population in these areas where they don't get jobs. Everything's all connected one way or the other. So, we need President Trump. We need him to get a bit more proactive in these areas. He has 2 years left or whatever it is, to do something. And, he should start doing some of these things, especially in the immigration area. I think he has all the possibilities to do something. He can use executive orders to do a lot of things. We really don't need Congress.
Well, sometimes I've wondered if Build the Wall and illegal immigration are not the shiny object. Perhaps the president, and if not the president intentionally, his handlers have us so focused on the shiny object, on the wall not being built and so forth, and the problem of illegal immigration, that we're not even paying attention to the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, legal immigration in this country is being expanded exponentially.
Yes, legal immigration has always been a large component of the overall immigration. The number of illegals and legals are roughly the same and have been, for a very long time. The politicians and general populace weren't paying attention to the problem with immigration for many years. There was a few organizations that kept on, trying to wake everybody up, starting in the 1970s, and the major politicians paid no attention to it, so the media paid no attention to it and actually tried to hide it. So they have to face the situation now. Saying there's no emergency at the border when even in the same newspaper there's reports of the Border Patrol being overwhelmed or invasion occurring at a greater rate than ever. They're still saying there's no problem with the border. They can't have it both ways.
The North Carolina Heritage Political Action Committee was organized by concerned citizens of North Carolina in 2015 in response to the increased attacks on North Carolina's history and heritage. The North Carolina Heritage PAC supports state and local candidates for public office who pledge and show their support for the protection of Confederate memorials and the preservation of all of North Carolina's history. We all know that Confederate memorials and symbols are the easy targets, and that the end game of our leftist enemies is to erase and rewrite all of history, from the colonies to the War on Terror. If we fight them for our state's rich Confederate history and heritage, we may be able to stop them from their mission of total destruction. Join the North Carolina Heritage PAC now by visiting ncheritagepac.org. Once again, that is www.ncheritagepac.org. And help us on the front lines of North Carolina politics. The mission statement of North Carolina Heritage PAC is that the North Carolina Heritage PAC was created with the purpose of supporting diverse efforts to defend and preserve the heritage, traditions, monuments, cemeteries, flags, emblems, and other legacies of North Carolina history against those efforts to remove, deface, legislate against, alter, and otherwise corrupt or pervert their meaning, history, presentation, and standing in our state. Once again, www.ncheritagepac.org. You told me earlier about Rick and why you'd invited Rick Tyler to come and speak. Why did you invite me to come up and speak there in Maryland?
Your site is very, very good as far as Confederate or Southern issues and nationalist issues in general. And the particular area where you're going to speak is adjacent to the Antietam battlefield, where, you know, there's a lot of Southern interest, and we have a kind of a base of interest in nationalist issues as well.
So tell our audience a little bit about the event you've invited me to come and speak at, and hopefully we can draw a little bit of a crowd.
Well, you indicated you're going to speak on the difference between a nation and a state. A nation being one based on ethnicity and family connections, whereas a state is completely bureaucratic and has no interest in the composition of its components, so to speak, as long as they pay their taxes. So it's not really one that we can rally around as far as saving Western civilization.
So what does somebody need to do if they want to, and I understand there's going to be a lunch and some other things going on as well, so what does somebody have to do?
The proprietor of the place where we're going to have the event will be providing the lunches, and the event will be from 11 to 2:30. You'll have an opportunity to make a presentation for as long as you like, and we'll have a lunch, and we'll have questions and answers. And I'll be giving a talk also. And the event is sponsored by the Barnes Review in coordination with the Council of Conservative Citizens. And I think you'll enjoy the venue itself, which will be very interesting. You spend the day there and find all kinds of things of interest. I can't mention it on the phone here, you know, but here's a big outdoor area where we can, if we have a big enough crowd, we can have this outside under a tent. And you can do like a tent preaching, if you like,
okay,
so to speak. There's a lot of tourist attractions around. Enough to keep somebody interested. If they wanted to spend the weekend there, they could certainly do that and make that a vacation destination without any problem, you know. And it's just a few miles from West Virginia. You know, you go a few miles south and you cross the Potomac, and then you got the town of Shepherdstown, which is a college town, a very pretty town with a lot of antiques and interesting places to visit. We have a restaurant there called the Bavarian Inn, which I've been to recently, which is a world-class European-style restaurant, which people would enjoy. And we got a lot of other attractions. Well, there's a lot of other so-called Civil War attractions around the whole area, being, you know, an area where a lot of battles took place during the war. Besides the Antietam battlefield, we got Harper's Ferry, which is only a few miles away, which was the scene of John Brown's raid. And there's a lot of smaller events that took place that, you know, in the area, such as South Mountain, which was a major battlefield also, which is only a few miles away. People are aware of your site, and I think they would come.
Well, I definitely hope that on June 9th, which is a Sunday, that anybody who can make their way to southern Maryland, to the Antietam battlefield area, that they will contact you and that they will reserve their spot there to be able to attend what I know is going to be a great meeting, and also enjoy what will be some great fellowship and some great food as well. Of course, if you want to attend the meeting, you're going to have to contact Sid, success_express. Success_express. Success, SUCCESS_EXPRESS. Success_express at yahoo.com. Yeah, there are still a few people out there with yahoo.com addresses, and Sid is one of them. But get with him and pre-register and reserve your spot, and you will not regret it. I look forward to being able to meet you at that exciting upcoming event on June 9th.
Breaker one, might be crazy, but I ain't dumb. Crazy Cooter coming at you. Hey, y'all, got your ears on? Well, I got some news for you. We're here at our brand new Cooters in the Country store in Sperryville, Virginia. Good old Sperryville, where Cooters started many years ago. Folks are coming from all over Hazard County, and we're going to have a grand old time with good music, good food, and best of all, good friends. Hope y'all can be there. Whoop, whoop, here come Enos. Huck got Cletus with her. I'm down and I'm gone.
There's one more political thing that I want to ask you, political question, just get your opinion on real quick. And that was yesterday. Rudy Giuliani was on Jake Tapper's TV show there on CNN. And Giuliani is, correct in this, but obviously now he's given the left a football to run with. He basically told Jake Tapper that there's nothing wrong with taking information from the Russians.
If we give them a chance, they can be allies. I mean, I don't see why not. There seems to be a bastion of Christianity right now, whereas everybody else is falling by the wayside in that respect. I mean, they offered to help us restore the Notre Dame Church. I mean, they're very religiously oriented. After however many years, 70 some odd years of being controlled by the atheists, they came around to be staunch Christians. It didn't really dampen their enthusiasm. So I think we're kind of picking on them because we need somebody to pick on. We need to maintain our military-industrial complex and create enemies when we don't have to have one. So, we surround Russia with NATO bases, so they naturally are wondering what's going on. So, they have to take defensive measures. They don't know what we're going to do. The communists are not in control anymore. We have to realize that,
So my understanding is that you've retired as the editor of the Citizen's Informer, and so now that you've retired from that labor of many years, what's the next thing?
Rick Tyler and I are going to speak about being an officer with the American Freedom Party. I expect to be involved in the party doing something important. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be yet. And I do write articles for a lot of other publications, the Nationalist Times, national site called newswithviews.com that has 100,000 readers, and they have about 40 different conservative authors who regularly write articles for them, and I've written about 20 articles for them over the last year. So I have a lot of venues to make my opinions known too, So there's no problem with me getting my word out. I have my own newsletter as well, www.newswithviews.com. I'm not getting paid to do that or to write for these other publications either, for that matter, but it's just a labor of love and a patriotic thing to do. We'll see what happens with the American Freedom Party. I think they can use some help, in getting their word out. If President Trump doesn't run again for whatever reason, we don't really have anything to go on. And libertarian parties, they're just interested in economics and nothing social. And so I don't know who else we can go to. We don't have anybody else in Congress who was, or anywhere else for that matter, willing to run. King, the representative from Iowa, he would be a good one, but he's not in the running for anything. And it demonized him to such an extent, he probably would have a hard time getting anywhere. We have to have somebody who's outside the establishment, pretty much, to get the ball rolling here. We had Pat Buchanan at one time, but he's been, neutralized. He's still a voice for, our interests. But, he does that through columns rather than politics. So we need some new source to start the ball rolling so we can eventually take the country back. It has to be somebody outside the Republicans and Democrats. I don't think we can save the Republican Party at this point. We have all the rhinos, so to speak, and they would all gang up on whoever it is. We let that guy Ryan control the Republican Party for a long time, and he certainly wasn't a friend of ours. We got Mitch McConnell, who's, neither here nor there. He's not really one of us, so to speak. Like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? We don't have that much time, but things can happen in a short period of time. We have an undercurrent of if we get the right person in there and the right movement, I think we can go pretty far. We just need to get people involved and get somebody who everybody would look up to. From what I've seen, Rick Tyler could very well be the person. He seems to have unlimited energy. I don't know if anybody knows that he's had 19 children with just one woman. I think he's trying to prove a point. I have to bring that out when he comes here and find out, what's going on. But I think that's the idea, kind of setting an example for us. I met some of these children at the convention we had last year. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. We have this convention from June 28th to 30th at Montgomery Bell State Park, Tennessee. It's about 45 miles west of Nashville. And we had some of the big lights of the movement who are going to be there. The same group pretty much who we had last year. We got Earl Holt, president of the Council of Conservative Citizens, Bill Johnson, the president of the American Freedom Party, Richard Spencer, the alt-right representative, James Edwards, the founder of the Political Cesspool broadcast, Rachel Pendergraft, she's involved in the American Heritage Committee, Dr. Michael Hill from the League of the South, Dr. Tom Sunak is a former Croatian diplomat and university professor. We got Dr. Kevin McDonald, who don't need any introduction, academically speaking, for a very long time. He's written several books. And Dr. Adrian Krieg is on the editorial board of Nationalist Times. He himself has written over 20 books, and he writes a regular column. So, we've got a good bunch of people here. And there's plenty of time yet to sign up for that. So it's nationalsolutions.com. And there's a registration form on that site to sign up, and the pictures of these various people I've mentioned. So this is a joint conference of American Freedom Party and the Council of Conservative Citizens. This venue hosts a lot of nationalist-type meetings, including American Renaissance Conference in May. Very good success, and they keep the leftists at bay. There's no problem with any kind of protest or any kind of fears of any kind of interference with their activities. And also I have another event coming up June 22nd in Baltimore. Roger Devlin's going to be a speaker. He's a prominent nationalist who's addressed international gatherings.
And I'm going to cut it there because we are literally out of time for today's TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. But as you can see, even in retirement now, Sid is putting together a lot of meetings in different places across the country, primarily there in the area of the nation's capital, which is, of course, where he's located, where his office is. But he's got stuff going on all over the place, and he's just does these broadcasts. If you can register for those, if you can get to those, I know that that you'll be glad that you did. But I would like to thank you for taking the time this week to be our guest here on TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. I do hope that you'll give me the opportunity to meet you if you can get to our nation's capital on June 9th. I would love to have you there at that event and to get to know you a little bit better, to meet you, and hope that you'll make that something that you can put onto your calendar one way or another. Would also like to encourage you to go to our website, www.dixieheritage.net. When you go there, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can also get a free copy of my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. We'll send you both the book and the newsletter free of charge, no cost, no obligation. All you have to do is give us a valid email address, and we can get both of those to you. And From all of us here at TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour, we'd just like to encourage you to come back to the same place at the same time next week. And we're going to have another great guest for you and another great show, and we're going to do it all over again.